A cold wind blew across the empty road that night when Max, the police dog, started barking. Not just barking, but crying, as if begging someone to listen. His partner, Officer Daniels, pulled at the leash, confused and tired after a long shift. The lights from the patrol car painted the wet asphalt red and blue. Something was wrong. Max could smell it. Fear, blood, maybe truth. But no one paid attention. And by morning, the whole town would be talking about the mistake that changed everything. Have you ever felt something was wrong, but no one believed you? Tell us in the comments. Before we begin, hit subscribe. It's appreciated. It was a quiet small town, the kind where everyone knew each other and the nights were calm. Officer Daniels had been working in the police force for almost 10 years. He wasn't a bad man, just tired, worn out, and trying to follow the rules. His partner Max was a strong German shepherd, known for his sharp nose and loyalty. Together, they were always the first to respond when something went wrong. Daniels often said Max was more than a dog, he was family. That morning started like any other. The sun rose slowly over the station, painting the walls in a soft orange glow. Daniels poured himself a cup of bitter coffee and gave Max his breakfast. The dog wagged his tail, waiting for his partner's usual pat on the head. Everything felt normal. No one could have guessed that within a few hours, both of them would face a truth that would shake their beliefs about loyalty, justice, and trust. Later that day, they received a call. A man had been found near an abandoned warehouse. The caller said he looked suspicious, possibly dangerous. When Daniels and his team arrived, they saw a young black man sitting by the wall, his hands trembling, eyes filled with fear. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He just looked tired, like someone who had been running from the world for too long. The other officers didn't wait. They shouted commands, told him to get on the ground. Max barked once, sharply, not in aggression, but in warning. Daniels felt something odd then, a strange pull in his chest. The man looked up and whispered something Daniels couldn't hear. Then Max barked again, louder this time, tugging on the leash, trying to pull Daniels away from the group. No one understood why the dog was acting so strange. They thought he was nervous. But Daniels saw something in Max's eyes. Confusion, maybe fear. Something wasn't right, but he couldn't explain it. That night, the man would be taken away. The officers would write their reports, and Max would not sleep. He kept pacing by the door, whining softly as if trying to speak a truth no one was willing to hear. If you were in Daniel's place, what would you have done? Tell us in the comments. The next few days were heavy. The air in the police station felt strange, like guilt had a smell. Daniels tried to brush it off, telling himself that everything they did was by the book. But Max wouldn't stop acting different. He refused to eat, barked at empty corners, and sometimes just sat staring at the door of the holding cell. His eyes filled with something close to sadness. The young man they arrested, his name was Elijah, kept saying he was innocent. But no one wanted to listen. The officers said they had found evidence nearby, though Daniels never saw it himself. He told himself it wasn't his job to question things, just to follow orders. Still, Max's behavior started to bother him. Every time Daniels passed Elijah's cell, the dog would bark, not in anger, but like he was trying to say, "Look closer." One night, Daniels stayed late to finish reports. The hallway was empty except for Max, lying quietly at his feet. Behind bars, Elijah sat with his head on his knees, defeated. Daniels felt a twist in his chest, wondering how the boy had ended up here. The next morning, he reviewed the warehouse footage. Elijah stood with hands up, unarmed, but another figure had slipped away just before they arrived. A detail missing from the report. Max whined, eyes fixed on the screen. "You knew, didn't you?" Daniels whispered, ashamed. When he showed his captain, he was brushed off. "The case is closed," he said. Daniels drove home with Max, the dog's head on his knee, silent and sad. He realized Max had sensed the truth first. Daniels didn't know how to fight a system built to look the other way, but he knew he couldn't stay silent. As the night deepened, he looked at Max and whispered, "We'll make it right." Max wagged his tail once softly, as if saying he was ready. Have you ever carried pain in silence, hoping one day someone would truly see you? Tell us in the comments. The rain came hard that night, hitting the roof like a heartbeat that wouldn't slow down. Daniel sat in his car outside the station, gripping the steering wheel, eyes on the folder in his lap. The footage, the reports, and the truth everyone wanted to bury. Max sat beside him, ears alert, sensing his partner's unease. Daniels took a deep breath. He knew once he stepped inside, there would be no turning back. He walked through the empty halls, his footsteps echoing against the cold floor. The same officers who had laughed and joked a week ago now avoided his eyes. He placed the folder on the captain's desk and said quietly, "You need to see this again." The captain barely looked up. "Daniels, I told you." But before he could finish, Daniels slid the flash drive across the desk. "Just watch." The video played in silence. The sound of rain mixed with the static hum from the old monitor. When the shadowy figure ran across the frame, the captain's face tightened. Daniels spoke softly. "That's the real suspect. We arrested the wrong man." For a long moment, no one said anything. Then the captain sighed, leaning back. "You don't understand, Daniels. The report's done. The department's reputation is at stake. Let it go." Daniels felt his throat burn. "Let it go?" he whispered. "An innocent man's life is being destroyed because it's easier to protect a report?" His voice trembled, but his hands stayed steady. Max barked once, a sharp, echoing sound that cut through the silence. It was as if he, too, was demanding justice. The captain's eyes hardened. "You'll regret this, Daniels." But Daniels didn't care anymore. He took the folder and walked out into the rain. The drops soaked through his uniform, but he felt lighter than he had in days. Max stayed close, barking again and again, the sound echoing through the night. The same desperate barks that had tried to tell the truth from the very beginning. The next morning, Daniels went public. He sent the video to an independent reporter. Within hours, the truth was everywhere. People started asking questions, demanding answers. The same officers who had ignored Max's warnings now avoided the camera's eye. As Daniels watched the news that evening, Max rested his head on his lap. The world outside was changing, slowly, painfully, but it was changing. What would you have done if this truth was suddenly staring back at you? Tell us in the comments. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. Daniels was placed on leave while the department began its internal review. Some called him a hero, others called him a traitor. But he didn't care anymore. He had finally done the right thing. The truth was out, and Elijah had been released. The boy's mother came to the station one afternoon, tears in her eyes. She didn't have words. She just hugged Daniels and whispered a soft, "Thank you." That moment said everything. At home, Daniels sat on the porch with Max lying beside him. The air smelled of wet grass after rain. He looked down at his old partner and smiled. "You tried to tell me," he said quietly. Max wagged his tail as if forgiving him. For all the training, all the commands, it turned out the dog had seen the truth long before the humans did. Elijah's story spread across the town. It became more than just a case. It became a reminder of how easily judgment can blind justice, and how sometimes the smallest voice or even a dog's bark can hold the biggest truth. Daniels often thought about that night, about how close he came to walking away from it all, and how different the world might have been if he had. One evening, he visited Elijah. The young man was sitting outside his small house, fixing a bicycle for a neighborhood kid. He looked up and smiled when he saw Daniels and Max walking toward him. There was no anger in his eyes, only quiet strength. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need words, just presence. As the sun began to set, Daniels looked at the horizon and whispered to himself, "Maybe this is where change begins." When one person finally decides to listen, he had learned something that would stay with him forever. Justice isn't just about rules. It's about courage. The courage to see what others ignore, to speak when silence feels safer. Max barked softly, his eyes bright in the fading light. Daniels smiled and said, "Yeah, buddy, you did good." What part of this story stayed with you the most? Tell us in the comments. Show some love with a like and subscribe to stay inspired.